So this first thing I'm going to do on this session is I'm going to look at the process I always use for editing any picture, be it a person, a dog, an aeroplane, the sky. I always run through a certain process, and that process is called digital workflow. You may have heard that term. And basically it means moving a picture from a camera to a final ready to print, or even maybe showing it on a digital screen. There are a certain amount of steps that a digital file always needs to take, because as convenient and as brilliant as digital files are, straight off the camera, they're still quite crap. Like in the old days, you wouldn't just get a negative and go around showing everybody a positive or your negative. You would do some editing in the darkroom. You would process it. You would go through all sorts of little fine-tuning elements to get the picture how you envisioned it. Well, digital photography is no different. There are purists out there who claim that their pictures are perfect straight off the bat. They're not. You're deluding yourself if that's what you think. So I'm going to run through some processes and show some processes today which I use, which kind of ensure that I always do the same thing. But more importantly, they go towards making my style. So if I stop doing this, if I don't do these workflow things each time I do a photograph, they're going to look different every time, and people won't then buy into my kind of look and my feel, because they'll see that it looks slightly different every time. So let's give it a go. I'm going to record my screen as well as my face and my voice, and then I'll edit it all together, and hopefully we'll get some kind of exciting thing going at the end of it. So I'm using Adobe Photoshop. I think this version I've got is what is it called now? Creative Suite, Adobe 3 million and something or other. I don't really care. They all do the same thing. You can do everything I'm going to do today on I think probably CS3, maybe even CS2. The stuff I use hasn't changed that much. Everything we're going to do today is going to be manually done. No automation. We're not going to press a little button and let some man-made AI bot do anything for us. We're going to just slowly and methodically work through what we should always do to get our final picture. So I'm going to use this picture of the fabulous Melina as an illustration for this session, because it's quite a recent shot from earlier in the year, and it's a great picture, and it kind of helps me hit all the bases, I think, looking at it as a raw file. And you'll see it as I get into it. So you can see on the screen there's a nice raw file. I shot this quite wide. I tend to do this. I like a little wide shot so I can get in later. I like to see what's happening around. To be fair, this might have been one of the early test shots, but I kind of like how Melina's face is and the shape of her body. You can see her muscle tone on her stomach and around her ribs and her arms, so I kind of quite like that. So on what we might call a proper shot, I probably would have zoomed in a little more, but for this purpose, for illustration purpose, it's great. So, but I'm not really worried about that at this point. What I'm looking at is this little thing up in the right hand side here called a histogram. And what you need to do as a photographer is get used to that being your friend. That is the be all and end all of everything. If you don't understand what the histogram's telling you, you literally might as well pack up and go home, because it's everything a photographer should look at for guidance. And I say that because predominantly people look at your pictures on all manner of different screens. I've got two different computers running here, TV over there, phone here, and all of them have different color space, they have different brightness, they have different clarity. So if you're using any one of those devices to tell you how good your picture is in a colorscape or an exposure term, you're going to be way off. It's going to look completely different on everybody's screen, and that tends to be why you see so many pictures that are overexposed or badly coloured from device to device. So we're going to avoid that by falling in love with a histogram. Now there's a histogram on the back of your camera. You can see that if you hit the info button, you'll get an histogram pop up. And really all it is, it's a kind of graphical illustration of where the data sits in your picture. And sometimes when you look at it, it doesn't really make much sense until you learn how to read them. And what you need to do is learn how to read what's shadow, what's mid-tone and what's highlight. And then also you want to look at what is colour. And And when I say colour, I mean colour that should be in your picture, not colour that shouldn't be in your picture. Now, this picture was taken on a Canon R6, and colour balance was set to daylight because the lights I use, the bonus lights I use, are also set to daylight. So in a true world with no other light on there, which there's not, I should get a perfect colour balance. But one thing you'll find about digital cameras is they lie to you, and you can spend all manner of all the time in the world and all manner of gizmos making your colour right, only to discover when you look at your histogram that it's wrong. And by wrong, what I mean is when you're looking at the histogram, anything that appears on the right hand side, so those peaks, that red, that green, they're what we call erroneous colours. They shouldn't be there. And you can see it slightly on this picture. If I zoom in, you can see a little bit of off colour. A grey background should be grey, not bluey, purpley, greeny. It should be pure grey. And a lot of the time they're not, because digital cameras lie to you. Even the most expensive flash units lie to you. They don't always flash the same colour. So the first thing I do at the raw stage is I'm looking for colour here. Now, mist colour, colour that shouldn't be there, always shows itself to the right hand side of the data. So if we're looking at this graph on the top right corner here, that little peak in the middle is where most of the data is. So anything off to the left there, where my mouse is scrolling around, anything to the left is shadow detail. Anything in the middle here is what we call midtone, and anything off to the right is what we call highlights. So if I'd have really overexposed this picture, if I just grab the exposure slider, this is the only time we'll use a slider, by the way, and drag it right across, you can see the exposure's gone up and the data's moved across to the right. But if I bring it back to where it was, you can see that it's kind of quite shadow heavy, and that's because I shoot slightly underexposed, because that's the way I like my pictures to be. I'll explain more about that as we go along. But within that, I'm not worried about the exposure now. I'm looking at the mist colour, which is slightly off. So there's a few ways you can fix that. You can go down to white balance here where it says colour. You can drop that, you can change it and see what happens. So let's go, I don't know, let's say daylight. Did you see the change in colour? It's made it worse. We've got more erroneous colours here, red, green and blue. Don't like that, we don't want that. What happens if we go cloudy? Oof. Lots of reddy orange, and you can see that in here now. So what happens if we go auto? Again, we're pretty much back to where we started. If we go as shot, that's very blue. Now looking at that, one way we can do it is we can see this little eyedropper here. You can pick up that little eyedropper and find yourself a nicely exposed, white's good, but any kind of grey is good, colour that's naturally lit like that, and just click in there. And did you see that little subtle shift? So it's just picked up a nice little in there, and you can see the colour on the bars here shifted a little bit. Still got a little bit of red. Not too worried about that. That's possibly a skin tone. But if we look at the before and after, you can see a little subtle change. Quite red, not so red. Quite red, not so red. Just by picking the colour where I wanted to. So now we're looking at micro adjusting our exposure. If we look at the exposure now, it's not too bad actually. If we look at it, we've got no massive highlights, no massive shadows that they're clipping too much. Telling me we're clipping a little bit here in the dark areas, but I'm not too worried about that. It's actually quite a nice exposure. But just to show you the limits and the possibilities of a RAW file, remember I said we're not going to use sliders. If I just click in that top right box there and use the arrow up and down key, I can change that quite a bit. So you can see now. Let's go back to where we were. If I hold down the shift key and the arrow key, it goes up in percentages, in 50s, like that. So you can do it more speedily. But for now we only want a little. So I might just, on this exposure, because I purposely underexposed it, I might just bring the highlights back just a little bit. Maybe 15% there. And again, if we click on the before and after, you can see a slight change. Slight change in colour, slight change in exposure. Right, just like that. Now you can do all sorts of other things with the highlight, shadows and all those other wondrous things, but we're not really going to do that today because this is not a horrendously exposed picture. That's a nice cup of tea, by the way. What we're going to do today is we're going to say, we're happy with that, Lance. And all we're going to do now is we're going to click open, and that's going to convert that over to a JPEG for us and open it in Photoshop. And then we'll take a look at some more micro adjustments in Photoshop itself. Now we've opened up. The first thing I want to do is I want to crop the picture. I don't want to start working with detail and looking at my histogram too much now, because what's really important is the detail that's in the picture. So I want to isolate the model in the frame and see what I'm going to do with that once I've done it. So I'm going to do that by cropping. But what a mistake a lot of photographers make is they crop willy-nilly. They just go up onto the crop tool just up here, and they go, width, height, resolution. They might not even type anything in there. They might just go, well, if I move that to there, and if I move that to just there, and go there, and bring that there. Oh, that's nice. Click enter. Oops, I cropped a foot off. That was an accident. But now you're left with constraints and proportions that don't fit onto most digital devices, but also if you want to make a print, if we look at the print size of this, centimeters, I've made that 30 by 20. Now an A4 is 29.7 by 21, so it ain't going to fit an A4. An A3 is twice that. If I look at the old school inches, I've done it 8 by 11. So 12 by 8 isn't going to fit. A 10 by 8 is not going to fit. So you see what I'm saying about cropping and getting the right proportions. So I'm just going to undo that. So for this example, I want to crop it the same dimensions as what it was originally off the camera. So if I click on original ratio and drag the edges of the box to where I want it, making sure that Melina's nice and centered in there, which she is. Just going to crop around, and then you can see by doing that I've managed to crop her and keep her looking nice and centered, and the picture is the original dimensions it always was, aspect ratio. So now I know I can go and print and get a 12 by 8, 18 by 12. If I want to do an A4 print or an A3 print, I'll go into the crop settings now and make that, but we'll cover that in another session. So all I've done is I've cropped away all the stuff I didn't want and made sure Melina is nicely framed in the middle of the picture, which she now is. So the next stage is we're going to look at what happened when we converted our raw file into a JPEG. For those of you that aren't sure or don't know, when you convert a raw file to a JPEG, it does that by compressing data. And really, the easiest way to imagine data is, imagine you've got 3 billion shades of red. You can see the 3 billion shades of red in a raw file, but in a JPEG you probably only need 20. So what the conversion does is it takes out the almost 3 billion reds and just leaves in enough that you can see on a screen to make the picture look all right. So that's how it compresses the file. The file remains the same size, physical dimensions, but the actual kilobytes or megabytes of it are reduced because there's not as much information in the picture. It's a little bit like having a bowl of water, fill it up to the top, it's still a bowl of water. If you half fill it, it's still a bowl of water, or there's not as much water in it, right? It's a similar kind of analogy. So the first thing we want to look at when we look at our converted JPEG is just again to check the histogram to make sure that we didn't put anything back that we've just took out. And what I mean by that is we spent a lot of time just making sure we had our colour right. But as you can see on mine now, somehow in that conversion I've picked up some horrible magenta, which you can actually see on the picture, I think. So if that happens, it doesn't always happen, but if it does happen, there's a real quick fix to get rid of that. So all we're going to do is, in our layers here, your layers may not look like mine, yours might be pre-packed how it comes out of Photoshop. On another tutorial I'll cover how to make it separate. What you're looking for is this little semicircle, this little black and white circle. If you click on that, you'll see a thing called photo filter. And in the photo filter, it's always preset to warming filter, orange, it's horrible, ignore that. What we're looking for is to get rid of that horrible magenta. We need to put its opposite colour from the colour wheeling, and that opposite colour is green. So if we just select green from the drop down, turn it all off, and then watch that narrow band of magenta disappear as I click into where the one is and using my arrow up key start to add in green. Can you see that magenta starting to go? Yeah. Now we've got a little bit of blue in there, a little bit. I'm not too worried about that blue. If it was a hell of a lot of blue, we could do another photo filter. What's the opposite of blue? Or opposite of cyan here, you say? Red. Yeah. You could just put a little bit of red in there. That's probably enough, 1%. So we've got a little bit, it's not really detectable, but we've got rid of that horrible magenta. If I just take those two off again, look at that picture, look at it now. Without the filters, with the filters. You see that? So sometimes that happens in the conversion from RAW to JPEG. So first thing we check, when we've opened it as a JPEG, have we killed our colour? If we have, use the photo filters to put it back. One more thing I might check at this point as well is sometimes we lose a bit of exposure. Remember I went and I tweaked the exposure of the RAW file by 15%. Sometimes in the conversion you lose that as well. So what am I going to do is I'm going to just check that using levels. Now you can see the histogram here is the same as what it was when we were on the other screen in RAW. But here it's mirroring again. So you've got shadows to the left, midtones in the middle, highlights to the right. We've got loads of highlights we could put in here, but we don't want to. It's not that kind of picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here onto the layers. I'm going to grab this thing called levels. And you can see there we've got a carbon copy of our histogram, like that. Just move them across a bit so you can see the picture. Now again, remember what I said before, we don't wang sliders around. We're not slider fiends here. We do everything by percentages, so we can fix by percentages. But just as an example, if I grab that slider and bring it right over to there, to where the data starts, you might think, well, that's a nicely exposed picture now. But you can see we're starting to lose detail in some of her face, some of her body. And also, it just becomes a regular well-lit shot, which is not what I was going for. So if we reduce that back off, what I would do is I would click in here. I might add another 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% to make it roughly, I think, where it was when I first edited it. So you can see, if I turn the iron off, that whole caper drama in the conversion. That whole drama in the conversion. So you might think, that's a lot of work. It's not really, it's just fine tuning and making sure things are perfect before they're released into the public. And you'll see when we look at a before and after finished picture at the end, you'll see it's all worth a while. So you can see there, 3 tweaks. It took me 5 minutes because I've been teaching you how to do it, but when you do it yourself, it's 20 seconds. All right. And again, if I just switch all those off, you can see the purple, got rid of the purple, brought the exposure back. I'm happy with that now. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to flatten that because I've created all these layers. Can't do anything with them. Can't retouch skin on them. Can't add any bits and bobs on them. So I'm going to flatten those back down to a single background file. You can either go layer, flatten image, or Control Alt and delete. Sorry, Control Alt and E, and that will merge the visible layers. So we're now ready to edit. So where were we? We've done levels, done color balance, we're cropped, we're going to do a bit of retouching. So as great as Melina is, a few little bits and bobs we can get rid of that are not unsightly, but we tend to, what I want to do with retouching is what I want to do is take stuff away that's like catches the eye, that's, you know, your eyes drawn to it instead of the bigger picture. So what I would do is quite a simple process, bit of skin retouching, maybe a bit of smoothing, just to make things look a bit more delicate and a bit more natural. Quite often with the lots of lights and the high-res cameras, things look a bit different to what they actually look in real life. Plus when you look at somebody in real life, you don't stare at them like you stare at a photograph. So my process for this, again, feel free to make your own up, but this works for me, gives me lots of control, which is the main thing we're looking to do. So if I grab the background and make a copy of that, and I'm going to zoom in, and just using the healing tool, I'm just going to take a few blemishes off. Just click on there, resize it to fit, hold down Alt, select the bit I want to take away, and do that. And I'm just going to go around Melina's figure a little bit and just clean up a little bit of those really obvious blemishes, which are not unnatural or unsightly, just a little distracting. And again, you can do as much or as little as this as you want. Sometimes you start going, I wish you'd not, because you get a little bit carried away or you do it wrong. You get a bad sample. But generally speaking, take you a couple of minutes just to whiz round. You'll notice as well I'm using a Wacom tablet just because it's easier to use a pen. This is a nightmare using a mouse doing this. But again, it's whatever suits you. And as you can see, that was a pretty quick process, wasn't it? Might just get rid of that freckle there because it's a little distracting. Bye freckle, like that. And then that's it. That's all I'm going to do from a skin retouch point of view. But what I am also going to do is add a little bit of smoothness back to her skin, because having met Melina, I know she doesn't look like this really in the flesh. So because we're using a model called non-destructive editing, what that means is we don't destruct our originals. I'm going to make another layer. So if I decide to come back later because I've made an error or want to change something, I can go back to the layer beneath, do the edit, then go again. If I keep putting loads and loads of stuff on one layer and then realise 10 steps back I made a mistake, I'm kind of stuck with what I've got. So every little thing you do, every little edit you make, go onto another layer so you can adjust it, delete it, fix it later. So again, Command J or drag it in into the plus sign and make a new layer. And again, what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to add some Gaussian blur. Now I use Gaussian blur because it's a tried and trusted way of making skin smooth. But to control it, what we do is we put loads on. We put more on than we'd ever need, and then we gradually take it off to allow us a lot of, a big degree of control in what we're doing. So making sure we're on the correct layer, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. You'll see mine's preset to 15 pixels. That's because I use it a lot, and that's what I always use on people. You can see if I put more on, what happens. I'll probably just kill my computer now. Yeah, it's all gone nuts, look. That'll take 5 minutes to come back, so we'll just wait for that to come back. But what you're doing is, you're looking to just disguise the skin slightly. 15%. Now you can see that's horrible. Clearly, that's horrible. While we're working on this, I'm going to reduce the opacity of that layer down to about 40, because then we can still see what we're doing. Just like that. But we can still see some of the effect. But what we need to do is, if you look at it, everything on Melina is now blurry. Her eyes are blurry, her lips are blurry, her bra straps are blurry. No good to anybody. So we need to take the effect off on those areas. And we do that by applying something called a mask. M-A-S-K. So, clicked on the right layer, this little camera looking gizmo here, third from the left, next to the FX and before the semicircle with a black and white. Click on that and you'll see it's punched a white hole on that layer. Now, so long as you clicked in that layer, and over here on your layer, on your colour palette, you got black and white. As long as you're set to black, you can rub out any of this you want using the paintbrush. Paintbrush is over here on this panel, or you can press B on your keyboard. You can see I've had a bit of a paintbrush thing going on before, so I'm just going to reset mine to normal. General brushes, like that. Take all the hardness off so it's a nice soft edge brush. And the reason we want soft edges, take that off so it's a soft edge brush. And the reason we want soft edges is because when we're up against an edge, an example, let's look at the bra strap. We need to have a nice fine line like that. Nice soft edge. If I have my brush set to hardness, you can see it's really brutal. We don't want that. Edit undo that. Make sure your brush has the hardness all the way off. So you make your brush just slightly bigger than the bit you're brushing out. Now you might be thinking, I can't see anything, Lance, I don't know what you've done. If I press backslash on the keyboard, you can see where I've gone. And wherever that's active now, you can see anywhere that's red, because I've got the backslash to show me the mask. Anywhere that's red is taking off that effect of the softness. So if I switch off the softness, look, off, on, off, on. If I paint out Melina's eyes now, like so, and you can see where I've gone, and then her eyebrows, like that. You can see now that it's sharp again, whereas it wasn't before. Her eyes are still sharp. So the idea is, you go around everything in the picture you want to be sharp. So for example, the nostrils would be sharp. Sometimes you have to be a little careful when you're getting close to bits that you want to be soft and stuff you want to be sharp. What I might do here is put the opacity on the actual brush itself down to 50%, so it's not as brutal. I might have to go over things a couple of times just to make it, just to get enough in there. Where the lips meet the skin, it's good to go for a low opacity brush, and then you can always have a couple of passes over it to make sure you get all the blur off. You can see when you've gone over things a few times because the red gets darker. You can see that if I do one pass there, it's not very dark. If I go again, look, see it darken up. So for bits where you think you might want some softness to remain, like there, finger ends, I would normally go with a low opacity brush, maybe 40%, 50%, just to enable me to do that. So this is probably the longest process of the lot, but trust me, it's worth it. And I'm just gonna blast around the whole thing really quickly. I mean, I wouldn't do this if I was doing it properly, but let's imagine I am doing it properly because I want perfection for my pictures. I would be really zoomed in, I'll be doing everything really tight. Then a bit that doesn't really matter is the backdrop. You can brush that out as quickly or as slowly as you want. But the idea is, get in there, get your brush as fine as you can, make it as, you know, fine-tuned as you can, because the more you do that was quicker than I thought, the more you do that, the better quality of picture will be. So you can see now that I've done that, and I've got a nice red Melina where I've gone round with the brush and made a mask, and the only bits that now have the blur on are her skin. And you can see that if you look particularly around the face and the neck, you can see the blur still there. Now at this point you can decide, well actually Lance, we're at 40% there, but it's probably too much still. So you can either click into the opacity, use your arrow up and down key plus pressing in shift, and you can reduce 10% like I've just done there. You can see Melina's gone really blurry now. Or you can leave it like I did, and the bits where you think there might be a little bit too much, just click on your brush, get your brush tool, drop the opacity on the brush, and just lightly brush out what you don't want, like that. And that's it for skin retouching. So a quick recap, we did blemishes on one layer, the background layer copy on my palette. Once we were happy with that, we made a copy of that. We put a 15% Gaussian blur on, we added a layer mask, and then using the paintbrush tool we brushed out the areas where we didn't want them to be blurred to reveal a nice soft skin, well lit Melina. And the next stage from that is I want a little bit more contrast. Now I've been looking at this picture for a while. I've looked at the lighting, I've looked at where things are. I just want to add a little bit more contrast, and you'll see why I want to do that in a minute. So in the next part, it's going to be contrast adding just in the same space. Okay, so we're going to add some contrast, and I'm going to do it on top of these layers. I'm not going to get rid of those layers like I did before. I'm going to do everything from here. And as my mask for the contrast, I'm going to use a thing called channels. Now, we did a lot of work in the raw file, making sure our colour was right. We lost a bit in the conversion to JPEG, so we put it back. What I don't want to do now using curves is add another load of colour misbalancing because I don't quite know how to use curves. So the first thing we're going to do before we do anything else, we're going to open a curves layer up using the layers palette and the little black and white circle. We're going to click on curves. Now, my experience tells me that when you open your curves will be defaultly set differently to mine, and they'll be set in here. If we go to curve display options, yours will be set to light like that, and that's because most people watch YouTube videos and they're used to grabbing the slider and wanging it around and going, oh yeah, how good's that look at Melina now, yeah, she looks great, oh wow, look at all that, that's great. You see so much of that, you've heard it, the S curve, the S bend, whatever you want to call it, it's all there. But while we're doing that, we're killing all the work we've just done. Look at the histogram going nuts, doesn't know what to do. So why would we do that? All we want to do is add some contrast. So I'm going to bin that curves, and I'm going to open another one up, and I'm going to show you how to set it up properly. Remember, everything we do is non-destructive, and everything we do we can go back and do again and change things by 1%, 0.5% if you want to. So if we open the curves up again and go into curve display options and change it from light to pigment ink, click OK. Now we can click in the middle there. It's a bit fiddly sometimes. We can click into the middle. Let me just open this up a little bit. And all we're going to do is where it says input and output, we're going to click in and make sure we start on 50. And then in the output, we're just going to go down percentages to brighten our picture. Can you see that? So you could say, I don't know, Lance, quite like that, but I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. Wow, like that. Right? That's all you're going to do. Output, less number. But before we do that, we're going to bin that. We're going to make a mask from our RGB channel here. And making a mask from the RGB channel, make sure that we don't further ruin any colour. It looks at the colours there, it loads that colour in, and it allows us to work in that colour space, just brightening or darkening areas. So all you do is of your mouse over the RGB in the channels, you press down control, you see it's highlighted a little square, click in the background, you can see now, can't quite see it, but it's loaded a selection in. It says there loaded selection, you can't quite see it because it's quite faint. And in that selection, it means whatever we do now with the curves are loaded into that selection, and it won't affect our colour no matter what we do. So while that selection's loaded, we click on there, go to curves, click bang in the centre, make sure that's at 50, and that's at 50, and I'm going to put 10%, I want to put 10% curve on this. Hold down shift and the down arrow key, 10% brightness. Can you see that? Switch it on and off, 10%. So that's my highlights. But I said I wanted contrast. So to get contrast, I need to do shadows. Instead of doing all that again, all I'm going to do is make a copy of that layer. So Control and J, like that. I've made a copy of it. And then if I go Control and I on the keyboard, that's inverted it. Using the same mask, it's inverted it. And now if I open it up, click on the center again and take that the other way, because I'm doing the shadows, and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've now got highlights and shadows on two separate layers, which I can independently now move to suit me. So if we look at them both, switch them both off, that's a nice picture of Melina, quite nice. But if I add the highlights and the shadows on that I've just made, it just adds a little bit more tonal quality to it. Just gives a little bit more. It just adds a little bit more tonal quality to it. It just gives it a little bit more oomph, I think. And when you're looking at the differences between great pictures and good pictures, these are the margins we're talking about. If we switch them off again, absolutely fine picture, quite nice. But I think those punched highlights and that beaten shadow just gives it that edge. And I'm quite happy with that now. And from this point on, I'm quite happy with that now. And from this point on, we're really just going to finish it off, making sure it's sharp, making sure our crop's good. I might tidy the background up a little bit, But pretty much that's the basics I would do on most pictures, if not all. So that's a whistle stop tour into my edit process. I'll be back in a sec. We'll just finish off on the making sure things are sharp, saving this properly. Currently it's a PSD file, it's got layers, it's no good, you can't show it anywhere, or nobody can see it unless they got Photoshop. So we're going to fix that and just tidy things up a little bit more, and we'll have a look at the final picture. Okay, so how do we sort this out now? So I'm happy with that. I'm going to file save as a copy. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop PSD file so I can come back and I can re-edit that anytime I want. Those layers will be there. I can come back and make a fine tweak. Imagine if I was doing this for Melina and I sent it to her and she said, oh, that's great, Lance, but could I have a little bit more like 10% tone across my stomach? I could come back in here, I could look at the curves, and I could just tweak that a little bit, send it back again, she'll be happy. I haven't got to go back to scratch, I haven't got to do anything massive, it's just sitting there. For me though, I'm happy. I'm not going to do anything else with this other than get rid of that unsightly crease that's in the background there that's doing my editing. So to do that, I'm going to flatten the whole thing again, layer, flatten image. I'm going to make a copy of the background layer, Control and J. I'm just going to zoom in here and I'm just using the spot removal tool. I'm just going to brush that goddamn awful crease that I wished I'd done on set out. You can see now that's gone, it's no longer unsightly. And now I'm just going to flatten the layers again like that. So now I'm ready to go. Now one final thing I might do here, especially if it's going for print, I might just make sure that it's sharp enough after everything we've done. Sometimes models move a little bit when you're shooting them, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're great, sometimes we end up over sharpening things. But a great way to sharpen things, particularly just things like the eyes and the lines, is again to use a mask. And best way I've found that I learned from Guy Gowan years and years and years ago, kudos to Guy, still going. If you want to know really about Photoshop, go and see Guy, he's the man. We make a red layer mask and we invert it. We do all sorts of wonderful things. You'll see in a sec. So all I want to do really with this is perhaps sharpen up the eyes, bra straps, maybe the top of the jeans. But instead of having to paint things and really get in and spend a lot of time, it's quite a simple process. So we grab the red channel, we make a new one, we press Command and I on the keyboard, inverts it for us. Now I want to make that a little bit more contrasty, so I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustments and Layers, levels. I'm going to make the blacks really black and make the whites really white. Click OK. Now just like we did when we loaded the RGB channel in to do our curve adjustments, I'm going to hold down Control again and I'm going to see the little highlight, copy that red. Now you can see it's highlighted, it's really obvious on this one. Click on RGB so you can see it. Now you're not going to be able to see this sharpening because of those marching ants as they call them. So I'm just going to go to view and turn off extras. It's still there, the thing's still loaded, you just can't see it anymore. I'm going to view the picture at 100% and I'm going to put a unsharp mask on it. So we've got a filter, sharpen, unsharp mask. You see it's preloaded to 100% and you can see a preview on this. So if I go that much, can you see our skin and our hair and everything's gone horrible, really, really over sharpened. I've found 100 to 200% is enough just to bring back the glint in her eye and that little bit of fine hair that you want to see. Click OK, fit on screen, job's done. We're sharp. We're as sharp as we're ever going to need. And that's it for sharpening. All I would do now is save the file as a high resolution JPEG by going File, Save as Copy, told you JPEG, give it that name. I'll call it Copy 2 because I've probably already got one there already. Click Enter, size 12, progressive, click Done. That's it. So that's taken me probably, I don't know, half an hour to teach you how I do my workflow for all my digital files. If that works for you, great. If you take a little bit from it, great. If you take the whole thing from it, amazing. If you think it was a load of shit, I don't care. Makes no difference to me. But it's worked for me for probably 15 years with a few tweaks here and there. So hopefully it will be of some use for you. And that's it really for that basic introduction to things I always do with pictures. Like I said, whether it's a dog, a house, a sky, a night sky, they're the things I'm checking for. Exposure, colour balance, getting rid of minor distractions, making sure once you've edited that your process allows you to fix things in minute percentages from 1% upwards, which we can, and you won't go wrong, and your clients will be happy because you've got a vibe and a style coming through, and you can go back and fix things, change things and tweak things really, really quickly. So I'm going to select a few pictures and I'm going to talk you through Colorscape, and I'm going to talk you through using the histogram. You remember I always talk about using the histogram to make sure your colour's right. Not trusting your screen, because the chances are your screen will be completely uncalibrated. And not only that, even if it is calibrated, is it calibrated correctly? Did you set it up? Did the person who set it up know what they were doing when they set it up? It's just as likely to be a mile out than it is to be a mile in. So we just want to make sure that our pictures are nicely coloured. They don't have any blue, pink, orange, any other colour backgrounds where they should be white. And making sure we're starting from the right point is really what I'm trying to get for. There's no point you trying to make a perfect print, if your colour is off to start with, because no matter what you do, your print will always look crap. So I'm going to use a photograph of a model I've worked with a few times over the years called Jess. She's a great model. This is a pretty standard picture. Model in a pose, black outfit, brownish hat on a white background. Quite a summery look. It was shot last summer. And let's say I'm going to make a print of this, and I'm going to make it A3. So A3, for those of you that don't know, is roughly that. Hopefully you can see that. That's an A3. Double size of A4, not quite as big as an A2. And it's a pretty standard size for printing for portfolios. They look nice on a wall in a frame or whatever. So let's say I've done all my edit. I'm ready to go. I've got this picture of Jessica up on screen. I'm going to send it to print. So what would happen if I sent it to print as it is? Bear in mind I've said I want an A4. So the first thing we need to look at is dimensions. The dimensions of a photograph. And this is the first thing where people kind of fall down and get stuck. There's an assumption that the picture that comes off your camera, your full frame camera or your crop sensor camera, that is ready to be printed. And if you print it A4, somehow the file and the computer and the printer know that you want it A4. So what people do is they'll go file, send the printer, send it to the printer, they tell the printer to be A4. And then it comes out of that and there's a bit missing. And people stand there scratching, they're going, oh, stupid printer. What's the printer done? Why has it done that? And it's not the printer's fault at all. The fault is yours for not making the file A4 in dimensions in the first place. So I'm just going to show you a comparison as what an A4 and what a picture off a digital camera will look like. Just going to make an A4 canvas. There, see the A4. And then I'm just going to drag the picture of the lovely Jess into that. And I'm going to put her in like that. And so you can see. So you can see now what's happened is my original picture is bigger than A4. So there's a million different things that can happen here. Either the printer won't resize it at all, and it could put it in anywhere like that, anywhere in that frame, let's say like that. But if that happens, we've lost all the bottom half of Jess, which is the biggest part of the photograph, shall we say. So if I just resize Jess to fit into an A4 frame, so let's just resize Jess so she fits in here nicely, like so. Let me put her centered. So if we center Jess now, yes, she fits top to bottom, but as you can see, we've got space around the sides. So let me just put a border around so we can see where the butt edges are. So you can see anything outside of those black edges, we're going to lose. So if we put her off to one side like that, when this print comes out, that's exactly what you'll get printed. So you can see, whichever way we do it, whether the printer recognises the file's too big and squashes it down like that, or whether it doesn't realise it's too big and shows you on the preview like we just saw before. The problem is the picture of Jess is not A4. It's nothing like A4. Now, A4 dimensions are 21 centimeters by 29.7 centimeters. So let's just bear that in mind. If we just go to the image size of my file, and we'll have a look at the original size, and we'll change this to centimeters to match what I just said. So this is 43.28 by 28.5, and I said that an A4 is 21 by 29.7. So you can tell this is far too massive. So you might think, oh, well, I'll just resize it to fit then. All right, let's go with the height. So the height on this picture, what did I say it should be? 29.7. 29.7. Like that. But what's happened there is we've now got the wrong height, width, sorry. We can undo that and we can put in, what did I say? 21. Like that. And then we can go enter. And it should resize her to be A4. So if we now drag this again into our A4 template and bring her in, you can see how she fits perfectly. Yeah? That makes sense? Have we constrained her? Have we changed the shape of her figure? Do we think? The image size, undo. In doing that, did we make her slightly fatter? We did. Look at her slender figure there. We squashed her up and made her fatter because we didn't constrain the proportions. So now she might well fit in there, but she's slightly the wrong shape. So how do we do that? How do we not do that? Suggest. How do we keep her the right proportions? It's quite a simple thing to do, really. Whichever version of Photoshop on, it's dead easy to do. We're just going to go into the crop tool here on the left, crop, we'll press C on the keyboard. In this little drop down menu here, we're going to click on width, height, resolution. We're going to type in there 21 space cm for centimeters, 29.7 space cm for height, 300 dpi to match the printer. The printer I'm going to use is set for 300 dpi, or pixels per inch it is on here. And then I'm just going to make sure I've placed that where I want it to go. But look what's happened. Oh no, we're going to have to lose a bit. You didn't tell us that in the preview lens. This is one of the things that photographers have to get used to. There's always a compromise on a shoot. The kind of idyllic thing to do is to shoot slightly wider than you might think, because you're always going to have this compromise if you come to shoot in metric measures. The simplest fix for me on this occasion, because I want to keep the whole of Jess in, I'm just going to make it like that. Look, she's centered. I've made it slightly bigger than I need. And then a simple fix when I click enter is we've got those black boxes which we need to be filled. So as you would just do a quick selection, edit, content aware fill. That'll fill it nicely. And then again, select the bottom layer so you can highlight the right bit. Edit, content aware fill. Do that again. Should fill it nicely for us, like so. Select, deselect to get rid of those marching ants, and then you can see we've got a nicely centered, nicely framed A4 version of Jess. Before I go any further, I'm just going to get rid of those layers that I don't need. I need them to be there, but I want them to be hidden. So I'm just going to press Control, Shift and E on the keyboard to merge the visible. If we go up and look at the image size, that's right, look, 21 centimeters, 29.7, 300 dots per inch, okay. So let's drag that out and let's chuck that back on top of that other one. Let's see what I get this time. In it goes. And we're in. Alright. Can you see that? The top one, right shape, yes. The one we did initially by changing the proportions of the picture, wrong shape, yes. See that? And then the bottom one, which had all those ridiculous edges that we had to put on to make her fit, is gone. So you can see now, quite simply, the correct way to crop your picture to an A4, A3, A25, whatever it is you want to do, is the crop tool, width, height and resolution. Type in the dimensions you want, A3, A4, whatever it is you're doing. Draw onto your picture. Make sure you get all the picture in that you want. If you have to crop bigger, do that and then use the content aware fill. Or you can even brush fill it or fill it however you like, whatever suits you, as long as you do. And then hit the crop and then you've got the right size. So we're now ready to print, aren't we? Well, no, we're not ready to print because we've missed the key step. And that key step is the colour space. Now, a lot of people fall foul here. Let's say they understand how to crop. They've got all that bit right, but they're going to just now send it to a printer. So if I send this now to my office printer over there, which is a relatively new Epson, and it's got some rather nice but rather rubbish laser copier paper in it for printing text and things. What's going to happen to that picture if I print it out? How is it going to appear when it comes out the printer? It will appear to be quite rubbish, and I should have one kicking around here somewhere to show you. Okay, so I found it. So here's the piece of nice shiny paper. You can see that's a picture of a model called Nicola on it that I did some hairdressing work with a few years ago. Doesn't look too bad there, but trust me, when you see it like that and then you compare it to a professional print like this, there's an absolute world of difference. Quality, feel, colour. You can see those two colours hopefully on there, a world apart. And that's not down to anything other really than just telling the file to be ready to be received by that paper. And the most important thing here at this stage is not so much the file, but the colorscape or the colour profile within the file. And you're not trying to match it to the printer, you're matching it to the paper. The paper is the important thing. So how do we do that? Well, what we have to do is we have to make sure we've got the correct colour profile installed in Photoshop or whichever edit machine we're using. And we need to embed that profile into the file. So if we go to convert to profile, if we go edit, convert to profile, you'll see a destination space here. And you'll see it's set to it's defaulted to sRGB. If we drop that down, look, there's a million and one different ones we can use. I'm looking for the profile on here which matches my end game, the place I'm going to send it to. So what you would do is you would look on here for whatever paper profile you're wanting to use, and you can see on this one mine says DC Colour Labs Frontier Luster. That's the one I want to use today. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to click enter. Right, now you can see nothing's really happened to my picture. Occasionally you might get a little bit of colour added in. So over to the right hand side of your histogram there you might see a little bit of colour appear sometimes. Don't worry, that's adding in a bit of colour that it knows the paper needs, because the paper without that bit of colour will be slightly miscoloured. So all you're doing again, just to recap, is edit, convert to profile, destination space, pick the one that you want, click OK. It's now embedded that file. Now before you do anything else, a really good thing to do is save what you've done. File save as, print file, ready for print, whatever it is, because if you don't you might send the wrong one. Normally I would call it file name A4 print saved, I know what it is. But now when I send that to print to DS Colour Labs, it will come back and it'll look slightly different to what it looks on my uncalibrated screen. But if I compare the histogram of it to the one here, it should be the same. I should have no erroneous colours in the background. It just should look the nice kind of tone she is. I wouldn't expect anything to be surprising. And I've used DS Color Labs for about 15 years and never had any trouble with prints following this process. So whether you're using cheap paper you found on the internet, find the colour profile for it if you're doing it at home. Whatever printer you're using, whether it's DS or another Pro Lab, find their colour profiles for the paper you want to use. And that might be different if you're glossy, lustre. There's all sorts of other ones they have. Metallic pearl, velvet paper, all that other stuff. Whatever it is you want it for, make sure that profile is embedded in your file before you send it to print. Otherwise, it'll come back not the right colour tone that you were expecting, and you'll be highly disappointed. So hopefully that'll help some of you get over the fear of printing and maybe get you to start doing it a bit better. And it will certainly help with the black and white side of things. I'll do another example of black and white in a sec. I'll show you a conversion process. But what's happening is people are sending black and white images to the printer without the colour profile. So when it comes back, they have like a blue hue on them. A blue hue, and you probably can't tell on these two pictures here through the camera. But I just hold them up there. One of those was colour corrected properly. One of those wasn't. And in the cold light of day, one looks a little bluer, one looks proper black and white, how it should. And I'll show you on screen. You can probably see a little bit better if I do it like that. I'll show you on screen a more exaggerated example. But that's what happens to black and whites, and it's a sure sign that people don't know or have missed that step of making sure the profile is right for the paper. And to be fair as well, sometimes cheap crap paper and cheap crap printers, no matter what you do, you're going to get a blue tone coming back. A good way to check it is to not look in artificial light like fluorescent or tungstens, because they'll not give you the correct colour. Go outside into daylight and hold it in daylight. And if you've got an horrible cast on your picture, chances are you've used crap paper or not had a colour profile installed. Alright, I'm going to make a quick cup of tea, and I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about black and whites. Alright, so let's do a black and white. So I'm going to stay on this picture of Jess because it's probably a good one to demonstrate black and white, but I'm just going to hold it there a little sec. I'm just going to talk about colour. So people conceive colour as being, so people conceive black and white as being something without colour. And quite often the thing they do to get rid of the colour is just desaturate everything. So if we look on my screen and I just open the hue and saturation things and just drag off the saturation, you can go, oh, look at that, lovely black and white. Bang, save, print, done. Well, not quite, because when you desaturate something, you got to remember the colour is where the detail lives, particularly on something like a person. So let's say Jess has got nice coloured cheeks, she's got nice coloured neck, hands and breasts, everything's nice and coloured. So if we take the colour off, what are we doing? We're taking away that colour detail. But the information of the detail is in the colour. The tone and shapes on her face are defined by that colour. So if you take them off like that, you can see that definition disappears. Is that what we want to do? Or do we want to leave that definition there and simply mask it, simply hide it, so we can no longer see the colour? Well, I'd say yes, that's exactly what we want to do. Why would you go to all that trouble of shooting, colour balance, white balance, edit, colour balance, white balance, check, to get to a perfect picture like this, to then whip all the colour off and all the skin, lips, eyes, hair, outfit colour off with it? We want that detail to be there, we just don't want to see it in colour. So how can we do that? How do we do that without ruining what we've got there? Well, the best way to do that is it's simple really. We're just going to mask the colour. The colour will still be there, we're just going to mask it. So how do we do that, Lance, you say? Well, if we go down to the little adjustment layers button here and click on that, click on solid colour. Now, the important thing here is you don't use any colour. We just want to use anything that's on the grayscale. So white down to black. Any of those neutral colours will do. Click OK, and then where you've got a blend mode here that says normal, we're going to change that to colour. Bang. Mono. And the good thing about that is all that colour detail that we were taking out before is all still there. It's just masked. That little curve we've got there is still there. It's just masked with that. And that's the only process I ever use for making black and whites. And we'll have a look at another we'll look at another one just to show you that it works for things as well as people. I use this as an example on for another tutorial, this same picture. But here we are, guy crossing the street, nice and contrasty. Let's say I want to make a black and white from this. I don't want to desaturate it and take all, I will lose all the detail. His wheels are coloured, all this kind of like tarmac detail will go if I desaturate that. So all I'm going to do in the first instance is solid colour, make sure I've got a neutral colour, change the blending mode to colour, he says, like that. Nice base for to start for black and white. Yeah, actually quite nice that. Now I like a load of contrast on my black and white, so what I do from here is I put a load of contrast on, but I don't do it using things like curves or exposure or any of those other things that you don't have any scope for fixing, adjusting. I do it using a luminosity mask and some curves. I'll show you the process. It's quite simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the RGB over in the channels here. I'm going to load the RGB into the picture and use it as a mask. So I'm going to press Control. You see that little hand appears next to the cursor. I'm going to click on RGB and you see how it's loaded that. So when I use my curves now, all it's going to do, because I've loaded that luminosity masking, the luminosity is like the outline, the fabric of the picture. When I do this action now, it's only going to affect the highlights, not the shadows. So I'm going to boost the highlights 30%. Can you see that? So I'm holding down Shift and arrow down. 1, 2, 3. You can see there's only the highlights moving. I'm going to go back 10, so it's 20%. So it's right on the edge of exposure. The sky's gone a little bit there, not worried about that, but these areas are right on the edge of exposure. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to press Control and J to make a copy of that, then Control and I to invert it. So now all I'm doing with the inversion is making a negative of that. So I'm going to click in there and put that back to 0. And this time, because I've inverted that selection, instead of it moving the highlights, it will just move the shadows and midtones. So I'm just going to put 5% on that because that's loads. So if I switch that on and off now, look, can you see that on the screen? That's quite a dramatic shift in shadows, and that's quite a dramatic shift in highlights. And the good thing about doing it this way is I can switch them all off, or I can feather them even more. I can either click back in and move that up and down, 12 more or less, or I can just click on the opacity for each layer and fine tune it down. Again, whilst I'm watching what my histogram's doing, because obviously if you go too far, the histogram will tell you you've gone too far. Yeah, you see all that shift over to the right hand side. So again, I'm not really watching what the screen's doing. I'm instinctively watching what my histogram's doing. 10, 20%. In fact, I'm going to go for 15% on that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like that. Nice black and white. If I was being really finicky, what I might do is I might go into the sky here, click into the mask area on the highlights, use my paintbrush, and I might just brush in back some of that detail back in where it's been lost a little bit, but not much. That's pretty much all I do. So that's what I would do for my black and white. And then what I make sure I'm doing is I'm prepping it for print by doing the edit, convert to profile, selecting the right colour profile for the print paper I'm using, OK, send it to the printer like that. Then hopefully it will come back as a black and white, like this one of my beautiful wife Kirsty, and not like the one I showed you before of the great Paddy, because that one, where did I put it? That one is completely blue. You can see that. It's pretty obvious. It's shady blue, and that's because it's purposely not calibrated on some crappy paper just for a demonstration. And I'll show you. I'll show you kind of what will happen if you don't quite get the colour right, and it will look something like this. It says, instead of my colour being completely black and white like that, you will end up with something like more like that when your print comes back. Maybe a bit less dramatic, maybe more like that, where it's black and white, but it's got a little bit of mist colour in it. And I've over exaggerated that so you can see it. But without the right colour profile for the right paper, you're going to get something like that. So it's imperative that when you do this, you make sure that you do your colour profile. This one's already got the colour profile in it, or has it? No, it hasn't. So I'll show you again how to do the colour profile. Edit, convert to profile, click the Yes Colour Lab Pro Illustra, OK. Now you can see on this one it's added a little bit of blue in here. Don't worry about that. It's telling me that it needs to add that in for the paper I've selected, so when it comes out at the print stage, it may be that the paper they use has a little bit of a red hue to it, so that little bit of blue makes sure it's neutral. And that, all my good ones are from DS, so don't worry about that. The colour profile is imperative. Alright, and that's it for printing black and white and making a black and white. They are pretty simple processes, and again, they're the ones that I use regularly. I use them all the time. I know I repeat myself a lot, but that's what I do. It's repetition to get yourself to a point where you know exactly what you're doing. And whether you're cropping, resizing, getting things ready for print, make sure you follow steps. Mine worked for me. I was taught them a long time ago, and I've used them. I've not deviated from those in probably 16 years, because they work. Tried, tested. Why fix it if it's not broken? Is the saying, isn't it? To get 400 plus, which I kind of like, that I'm happy with, that are in focus enough to be usable. That's the other debate with street photography, as to what's acceptable in terms of focus. And like with a lot of photography, you're not always looking for perfection. You're not looking for perfect exposure, perfect composition, perfect focus. You're looking for stories, and on the street we're telling stories. So it took me a long time to learn that sometimes a slightly blurred moving target, if it's interesting, is better than a not interesting picture that's perfectly sharp and all the other things that come into an exposure. So I try not to be too hard on myself in terms of street photography. If it's miles out of focus and looks a bit crap, then I won't use it. But if the story's there, even though the person may be moving a bit blurred, or it's focused on the hands, not their face, all those other things, I tend to not get myself in too much of a state about, because the nature of the beast, without jumping out, stopping and saying, somebody stand there for a second, I'll take your spontaneous photograph. Without doing that, then you there's a lot of things that are out of your control. So pointing the camera in the general direction, hoping you get a shot, taking a burst of 3 or 4 shots, one of them will be somewhere near. It kind of pretty much works for me. So that's my approach, but with some control. And then, because I'm shooting in RAW, I can get into Photoshop and I can have a look at them and bring out the detail and try to make it how I saw it and how I felt it at the time. And that's a little different. I think I must see the world in contrast. Everything's heavily contrasted for me, and each to their own. People all have the different tastes, but I think I see the world quite contrasty. So when I look at my pictures, I'm always trying to make them how I felt them at the time, so they always end up being a little contrasting. You'll see as we go through this edit how I get to that point. So I'll pick one we'll start with the personals. This guy, I just saw him and it was really interesting. This is behind the Pantheon in the centre of Rome, and like with all major cities, there's lots of homeless and there's lots of deprivation, and you know, you kind of got around the front, you got thousands of people queuing to go and see this fabulous building, which is strangely enough, just a slight aside, when you get in it, it's another one of those places that's maybe could have been, possibly, we think, which tells me we don't know anything about it really. But it's interesting to see all those thousands of holidaymakers trying to get in there, and just around the back there's a guy collecting cardboard to sleep on, and I didn't actually realise that until I came to edit it. So I'll open it up in Photoshop and we'll have a look in RAW and see what I got straight off the camera. So you can see straight off the camera, that's not too bad. ISO 200, f4.5. Well, this one 1/250th of a second, so I must have adjusted it at this point for some reason. Can't remember why, but I must have. And that's not too bad when you look at it. And focus wise, it's pretty acceptable, I think, really, when you consider he's moving, I'm moving. She's a little distracting in the background, but is actually almost nicely framed. I'll probably crop that a little bit lower, but as a general exposure, that's not too bad. Not too bad at all. But there are a couple of little clipped highlights I want to bring back, and I think I'd like to see a little bit more of his character. So what I'm going to do with that is, first thing I'm going to do is actually look at the colour, because it was very warm and the camera was set to daylight. But as I've said in previous videos, that cameras light all the time. In fact, the colour balance, white balance on most cameras is crap, and it certainly rarely marries up with what you see in the histogram. So if we jump to auto, takes all that red off. But that building there, that is red brick, so I know, instinctively I know that's not quite right. If I put it onto daylight, which is what I shot, so I shot auto, as shot that was set to daylight. If we put it actually on daylight, it just goes a little warmer. You can see that. As shot, that's set to Canon daylight, and then daylight in Photoshop. Vastly different, and if we look at the histogram, it's added loads of red in there. But I do know from memory that brick building behind him is quite red. You can see a little bit in the shirt. Awful, using the colour dropper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trust my memory, and I'm going to go with daylight as I shot it, because I think with the Adobe Daylight, it's just pumping too much red in, particularly into his shirt. So I'm going to leave that as was. Next I'm going to look at exposure, and I said I want to get rid of some of the highlights. I think there's a couple of highlights here just are annoying me a little bit. So I'm just going to drag maybe 20 or 30% off there, and you can see that. You can see the highlights dropped a little bit. But conversely, I want to see more detail in his face. I want to see more of the guy. So if I just pump up the shadows a little, which gives me a little bit of highlight too, you can see if we just click before and after, the detail, particularly the shadows. And because I like to slightly underexpose and then bring it back at the next stage, I'm just going to knock 25% off the exposure there, just to make sure I've got plenty of room to play with highlights. Okay, there's lots of highlights there. I'm going to OK that now. So that's the first process I always do. You'll have seen that in the other videos I do. Check the raw file, see where I feel it fits. So now we've got him into into Photoshop, and again I'm going to look at my histogram. Got a little bit of missing exposure here to the right, which is great because it means I can feather the highlights back in where I want. So if I open up the levels and just pop in some highlights into there, just pops, gives it a little pop. And although Photoshop's telling me that I'm already pinching shadows, I'm going to pinch a little more because, like I said to you earlier, I like contrast. So if I flick between the two, see the little punch. Now I know some of you are saying, but Lance, you took that off in the raw file. I did, and that's because I like to feather it at this stage. So now I've done that, what I can do is, this will behave, using the paintbrush tool and just dropping the opacity on it a little bit to 50%. I can brush in a bit more of the detail back into there, so it's not quite so blown, because that was really the only place where we've got a little bit of blown highlight. And yes, I know I'm being really finicky, but if this was going to go to print, those highlights would just be banks of white, and that's not what we want, is it? So just quickly brushing back in his shirt detail, which is quite nice. And I'm also gonna just, I'm probably gonna crop that out, but I'm gonna take it out anyway. Let's have a look. So conversion, edit, conversion, edit. You can see the color shift in using levels and brushing out those highlights. We've just made that slight alteration, but we've still got blue and red in the same place. Not quite got so much yellow now, which will have been in the highlights. So quite happy with that. We can see his face, see his expression. I know, yes, he's a little bit soft, I know that. So quite happy with that. What do I want to do now? Well, I'm not going to do any more work on that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Shift and E, and then I'm going to file save as a copy, save as a JPEG copy, size 12. So if I make a mistake from now, I've got a copy of that. So I said to you before, she's a bit distracting, isn't she? So before I go any further, I'm just going to have a play around with taking her out of the picture just to see how it looks without her. So I'm going to edit content aware fill. Let's see how fill deals with her. Oh, she's gone. Like so. So just quickly, yeah. Is it a true street photo? I think so. I've just taken a distraction out. It's no different to taking out a red blob or something. She doesn't really add to the scene. She's not a lot of people, a lot of posh people sitting there with loads of money with a Tesla. There's no juxtaposition there. She's just a young holidaymaker that just happened to get in shot. So I wanted to take her out. If there was a juxtaposition there, I would have left her in. So let's just have a look how that works. Alright, so I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna clone out the pipes or the railings, whatever it is, he says. Just like so. Just to tidy that up a little bit. There we go. So she's gone. Now as I'm looking at that, is there anything else there that's distracting? Got rid of the distracted girl. That highlight there, as nice as it is totally distracting to me. So again, I'm just going to make a mess of getting rid of it like that. So you can see people won't be looking at that now. So that's the kind of distractions out of the way. What I'm not keen on though is all this space up here. Now if I was going to use this as an advert and it needed some text on it, I'd probably leave it, but I'm not. So I'm going to crop it. I'm going to centralize it more so we just see him, not so much what's around him. So like I always say, when you crop him, make sure you crop him for purpose. Original size, original ratio, don't want to change that. Just going to centralize him just until he's centered, which is probably about there. so I'm probably getting rid of about 15 or 20% of the picture, and is now centralized quite nicely in the frame. Looks quite good. I've not done anything else other than get rid of those bits. I haven't done anything to him. I'm not going to sharpen him up or any of that stuff, because remember, I've got moving target, guest settings on camera, I'm moving. The fact that there's only that little bit of motion blur there, I think probably the focus kind of hit around here somewhere, around his chest, so that my focusing wasn't miles off. It's just that slight bit of motion blur that's kind of killed it, but it's I can live with that. So again, I'm going to flatten the layers. I'm going to save that over our last copy. In fact, I'm going to call this one copy 2, because we'll have a look at the two side by side, the first edit I did in that one, see how we think. And let's drag it back up and see. So that was the first one, that was the second one. Slightly distracting background, non-distracting, not centered, lots of spare wall space, not much use to anybody. Centered, less wall space. You can still tell where he is if you knew where that was. So that's it for me for that picture. So it's taken me 10 minutes to talk you through what I've done, but if that's me editing it, it's 30 seconds, maybe less, to do that. And I've got a colour copy, and what I always do with my street photos is make a black and white copy just to see how it might look in black and white. So we'll do that now. Same process for me as always with black and white. Using the layers palette, choosing a solid colour, making sure it's a negative colour, so anything that's on the grayscale, grey, white or black. Click OK, change the blending mode to colour, instant black and white. I want more punch, I want more highlights, more shadows, so I do that by loading in the RGB channel, pressing Control. You'll see that little thing appear above the cursor. Click on RGB, then we're going into curves in here. Make sure your curves are set up for pigment ink. There's a video of mine out there, shows you how to do that if you're not sure. Click in the center. I'm interested in the output. I'm going to give it 15% highlights, and now I'm going to copy that, invert it, and now this time I go back the other way, and all this does is affect the shadows. So minus 5% shadows. So highlights for highlights only affects highlights. Shadows inverted only affects shadows. Yep. And that's a much punchier, much more black and white. We're pinching on the edge of detail here, so again I'm going to click onto my highlights layer, click into the mask with the paintbrush tool on 50%. I'm just going to brush back in some highlights there because I don't want them to be blown out if I make a print. Just going to brush them back in. It's not so bad. Maybe that back wall as well, that's a little hot, but other than that, good to go. Shadows are looking good. Histogram slightly underexposed up here where I've taken off the highlights, but I'm not worried about that. File, save as copy, copy to M for mono, like so. I'm going to close that down, and then we'll just have a look at these two. Copy to, like that. Oops, what did I do there? 8 windows. And the mono, pop them both up side by side, and you can see quite nice black and white and colour version of the same picture. Detail in his face, you can see his expression. His clothes aren't overexposed. Colour's good on the left. The mono's great. So the only way I'll ever make a mono. Learned part of that from Guy Gowan. I've mentioned him in the other videos. And that's it. So I'm going to move on to the next picture. Today I'm going to talk you through a recent airplane trip, sky trip. Me and my wife Kirsty did to Athens in Greece. I'm going to talk you through some of my processes, some of my experiences, show you some of my street work, some of my work including buildings and places and things, talk you through the whole experience, and hopefully you'll get a little bit of something out of it other than listening to a 53-year-old British guy talk bollocks for an hour. Hopefully you'll get some photography tips, some approach tips, some ideas and evidence of how to approach things as a photographer. That's kind of what I hope from these podcasts now. If you've been with me since the start, you'll know I started just as a bit of some way of venting my kind of frustrations as a photographer in life. Didn't really care if anybody listened. It was just a bit of what's that word they use? Cathartic. It was cathartic. It was therapeutic. It helped me get a bit of out into the world. But since then, I've really enjoyed it, and people have said that they've enjoyed them, and I've given over some great insights and could have done more. So here I am doing more, 24 episodes in, 25 episodes in, and still talking bollocks. But today I thought we'll go through Greece, following on from my last podcast about non-player characters in the world, and showed you a little bit of the work in Greece then, but I didn't really go into it in that much depth. I just used it as a way to show the experience I have with NPCs. And so today I thought I'd give a bit more detail about the trip and the places and things I photographed in Greece, because it was a beautiful trip. I mean, as I'm recording this now, we've been back for 6 days, and I wish we were still there. It was great. I mean, the weather was good, the food was great, people great, photographically interesting and stunning in equal measure. And just, I don't know, I never thought I'd like to go on holiday. I never thought I'd enjoy flying. I'm not still sure I enjoy it, but it's a means to an end. But being able to photograph different cultures, people, places, has just really opened my mind to the possibilities photographically, and I guess it's made me expand my remit as a creative and as a thinker, and to the point where certainly my street photography has improved, become slightly different. I'm slightly less fearful of it. You'll probably notice as we go through these pictures, but I've totally given up on my enterprise of becoming William Klein. If you don't know who William Klein is a street photographer. He's dead now, poor lad. Fabulous fashion and street photographer. I think I'm right in saying he was French, but lived in New York. And he wasn't scared of going up to kids in the Bronx and shoving the camera in their face and taking pictures. And I'm trying to get to be like that, but I just can't do it. But also, having spoken to my wife about it, she says that the way I do it is better, more interesting, more real. People don't react because they don't know I'm doing it. I'm talking about shooting from the hip and not really looking at people and making it obvious I'm taking the picture. And she convinced me that it's the way I enjoy it. I think it gives you a slightly different angle on what you're looking at, what people are doing. It means the hit rate's not as good. I mean, I took 3,000 pictures over 7 days in Greece. Edited about, what did I edit? 500, so maybe. Sorry, I didn't edit 500, I got 500 edits. They're colour black and white. So about 250 edits out of 3,000, which is not a bad hit rate, considering mostly I'm shooting from the hip. Plus, I also had the camera set to burst, so a lot of those are kind of duplicated. So, probably still doing something like 1.5, 2 pictures out of every 10 is what you would call usable, or I liked. So did a bit of a lot of street photography, did some not street photography, did some building, did some architecture, did all those wondrous things you know you would do in Athens, or you should be doing in Athens. And I'll just talk you through what I did and why I approached it and why, and hopefully you'll get a little bit something from this. If not, I don't care. I do care, really. I want everybody to get something from it, but not everybody will get everything from everything, will they? The non-player characters out there will not get anything from this. So I'm just going to start off by looking at, I showed this picture as part of the last podcast, but I'm going to look at it again because I didn't go into much detail. This was a view from the window at the hotel we stayed in, and excuse me, and when you're looking at humans from a, I don't know how to say this politically correctly, so I won't. When you're looking at humans out of a bedroom window or out of a hotel window as opposed to at ground level, gives you a different perspective on what they are, what they're doing, who they are, how they are going about their business, what they look like. But more than that, you get shadow in a different place. So for example, you can see the long shadows on the floor on this, but if I was shooting this from street level, you wouldn't necessarily see that because they might be shot from the waist up or feet up. And I think when you add people's shadows alongside them, it gives you a totally different kind of like respect for light and shadow. That makes sense. When you're photographing people, you don't always get to see much in the way of shadow in street photography unless you're getting lots of nice backlit shots and that kind of stuff. But normally street photos are about the light you can see rather than the shadow you can't see. And on this, I just loved how we could see the shadows. I mean, this, for example, over here on the left hand side, the shape of that shadow of that guy there is great. It's just so interesting. Never mind him or anything else, I just love that shadow. Same on this one here, just the shadows are just something different. So when you're looking down on people, you can't not see that. And the human eye is a great thing, isn't it? It can see detail that your camera can't unless you tell it to. So when I'm looking with my naked eye, I'm always thinking about what I'm photographing, how I want it to look, because I've said this before in other podcasts and in other things. For some reason I see in contrast. I don't see in midtones, I don't see in highlights per se, I see in contrast. So when I'm looking at something, I'm looking at the shadows and the highlights and not really looking at much in between. And that's how my brain processes images. And that's what then as a photographer I want to see processed and put out on the page. So nearly the thing I do nearly always is try to slightly underexpose a shot. Although I have noticed in this last couple of trips I've done out in the street, I've been overexposing stuff, but that's down to familiarity with the camera and me fucking up a few settings. But I'm trying to underexpose because it's better to under than overexpose. Easy to rescue an underexposure than an over, but also I just like to be able to fudge that detail a bit more in the midtones and shadows rather than the highlights. So if you look at the histogram on this, it's slightly weighted to shadows. You can see that. You can see that there. A beautiful histogram would have a nice curve across there. But I'm never looking for that because I'm not an NPC and this is not Tony Hart's Take Heart program. We're all perfect and lovely. So first thing I do as always, I strip off the highlights. And I'm just going to drag the exposure down and see if by underexposing it I can lose all the highlights I want to lose. They're still a little bit hot, those highlights, so I'm going to take the highlights off that way and probably the whites as well, just so the detail on the box and on that guy's shoulder is still there once I've reduced the exposure, he says. My keyboard's fucked if I'm honest. Like so. So that's more like what I saw and how I saw it. Now, some people like to see detail. If we push the shadows right up so it really reveals a bit of t-shirt detail, it's nice. But this is where we start to see a little bit of noise coming. And I don't want to see noise really on this. I'm not really interested in noise. I'm interested in the highlights and the shadows. And the reason I've taken all the highlights off is because when I get to the next stage and I make a JPEG, I want to be able to feather those highlights and bring back a bit of oomph and control it better. So straight away there, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, no bad, quite like that. Although I'm going to pinch a little bit more when we get to the JPEG. Now I could do it in here using the blacks and the highlights, but I'll show you why I like to do it at the next stage. So I'm going to open that as a JPEG, and there we have a JPEG. And you can see here, look, on the histogram, we've got loads of underexposure, which is nice. Telling me now, you're underexposed? I know. Right. But what I like to do is use that to feather what I like so. And I'm also going to add 5% in there. So now, if we look at the contrast, see that? Just pinching, highlights a little bit. I'm just going to dial that back a few percent, just so we're not burning out his shoulder. And again, that's all I'm going to do. That is more like how I saw it. When I was looking out the window, that's what I could see. Not the beautiful exposed, everything nicely exposed like you could see on the raw. None of this detail up in the right hand side here I was interested in. None of that detail. I just saw that lovely shadow there. Looked out, saw the shadow, grabbed the camera, quick setting, ping. Thinking in Photoshop, this is what I need to do. So I'm now happy. That's a JPEG. It's good to go. But I'm a sucker for black and white, and I think sometimes I actually do see the world in black and white. I mean, I can't prove that. It does feel though sometimes like I do see it in black and white. And you can see just by looking at the red channel, quite often I use the red channel to how can I put this, to see what's going on in the mono. And the red channel is kind of like, sometimes it's a good place to use as a base to make a real strong black and white contrasty picture. I don't always use it, but sometimes I do, particularly where there's not much mid-tone. I find using the red channel as a base for your black and white is pretty close, more often than not, to what you need it to be. And like, as you know, I like contrast in my monos and my colours, and I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to find ways to make it as striking as possible, to make it look how I felt. So if we're looking at that red channel, you're thinking, how are you going to mimic that, Lance? How do you mimic that red channel? If we look at the blue, it's a bit dull. It's a little bit dull. If we look at the red, see that? Poof, blue, bit dull. Green, somewhere in the middle. Straight off the bat, bang. Ooh, look at that. So how do I use that as a template to be able to make a black and white without doing anything else? So normally if I'm making a black and white, what I would do is I'd make sure I'm on RGB in the channel so we can see all the colours. I'll go to solid colour. I would pick a grayscale colour down there, change the layer from normal to colour, bang, I've got a black and white. But you can see it's not as contrasty as what the red channel was. If I just show you the red channel again, look, ping, alright. So I want to mimic that, so how do I do it? So I've made my colour fill. Now all the colour that exists still exists in that picture. I haven't taken it away. I haven't done a desaturation and got rid of it all. It's all still there. It's just hidden by that colour fill mask. I want to bring some contrast, and I want lots and lots of control over my contrast. So what I might normally do here is I would go into the channels panel, hold down Control on my keyboard, or Command if you're a Macer, select RGB. It then loads in the luminosity into the picture. So all that happens now, it will only adjust the bits that I've selected. And you'll see if I go into curves, remember my curves are set to pigment ink, not light. You can see that because light just means you've got to wang things around. Pigment ink allows you to control. And I click bang in the centre, he says, to make that one I want. And I'm going to add 10, 15, 20% output. And now I did that by holding down the shift key and using the arrow up and down keys. Right, so we start at 50, we go 1, 2, 3, 30%. And you'll notice that that didn't affect the shadows. It's only affected the highlights. That's because of the luminosity I loaded in with the RGB. So now I've adjusted the highlights. I want to flip that and I want to just adjust the shadows. Easy way of doing that is Command and J to make a copy of that layer, Command and I to invert it. If we then open it up, click on here and go back to the center, And now if we go up instead of down on the output, I'm going to reduce the output to 55. You see that? We've now got more shadow. So, recap. Colour fill, change the colour on that layer from normal to colour, so it's just masking the colour. Control and RGB to load in the luminosity. Curves, added 30% curves. Copy that curves, invert it, -5, or output is 55, starts at 50. That's now given me, if we look at the original, can you see that? It's only subtle, but it's there. But it's still not that. So I can, between these, change these, make them more, make them less, do all those other wondrous things I want to do. Or I can simply use the red channel and make a picture from that red channel. So how do I do that? Pretty simple. Click on the red channel, image, calculations. In the calculations, we're going to change the blending mode to normal. We're going to make it a new document. So I'm going to click OK. You'll see it's opened a new document here. We're going to image mode grayscale, image mode RGB color. That's now a photograph. So you can either file, save as, call it what you want, or what I do is I'll select all, edit copy, go back to my original picture, make sure I'm clicked on the top layer, paste it in. He says, edit, copy, edit. Why was it pasted in there? Yeah, paste it in, and you can see that that's exactly the same as that. Now what I can do with that is I can drop it just above the colour fill, and if I want to feather that, you see that? I can do that, and that's a little simpler than messing around with these two layers to try and get it roughly where I wanted it. I know that's exactly where I wanted it. And that's the two kind of most used methods I would do to make a black and white to show the contrast that I think I see the world in.